Hello everyone, and welcome to the A4 tier list. With me, I have Prim is my ex, and together we are going to rank the strongest A4s that we have right now, meaning that we are not going to rank all of the available A4s because of the sheer amount of them that we have right now. This list will be divided into accessory roles, aka cap-up accessories, special gauge accessories, accessories that debuff the enemies, and so on. This way, it will be easier for us to talk about the differences between some of the A4s and the synergies that they have with themselves. Also, before we start, the tiers are going to be ordered, and all of the shardable A4s are going to have an awakening shard icon on the bottom right.
Yeah, we haven't included in this current ranking Temenos A4, which also has 50k cap up. It also gives 60 elemental attack, so it could theoretically be used as a cap up stat stick, but in general it's not used for that because first of all, it doesn't have a lot of cap up. Second of all, it doesn't have physical stats, which is usually the damage type that we're bringing to most fights. But despite that, the fact that it does have cap up and also gives ults does give it that dual use purpose. I personally used that even for my physical clears up until now in global. The reason why we haven't included it is because its primary purpose is that of an alt gauge A4.
Yep, we're going to have some A4s that serve different roles, like Hikaris or like Prim said, Temenos A4. We are going to classify them based on their main job, but whenever we talk about one of these A4s, we will also mention their dual purposes too. With that clarification out of the way, we can start the list with the cap of accessories and Bargelos A4.
Bargelos A4s, one of the only cap-up A4s that you can shard. Among this list, most of them are true limited, which means they never come into the exchange. Also, he's like the first character that gives cap-up, so he's the earliest one that you can exchange for. In addition to that, it's 100k cap-up, which is why his is still among the best.
Oh yeah, it took quite a while for this accessory to get power crept, and even then, it was one of our best A4s by a pretty good margin until recently. The other cap of accessories are hard to get. Pardis, EX Signa, Oshka, and Black Knight's A4 are all either Memory Champion or Collab A4s, which means that Bargelo is the easiest one to obtain out of the bunch. Something that we also want to mention is that as time goes on, our damage increases exponentially faster than our access to cap up, meaning that we are in a greater need of cap up accessories. We care more about the cap up than the stat at some points.
Yeah. Especially as we move on, we go from a Solon meta to multi-DPS meta as more and more characters get their own cap up. Also, in the case of Ult 2.0 era, the same row can have two actions, and characters like Ringu EX and Solon, they can use their ult while their row partner in the same row could be a DPS that has their own potency up doing damage, and then you can cast your potency up on whoever doesn't have their self potency up, and then you can still have up to 4 characters doing damage in the same turn. So if you just think about how many characters can do a lot of damage per hit, potentially all of those characters want at least one, if not multiple, damage cap up accessories. Even just going off this list, you can see there's not that many, and not all of them are even for, purely physical or purely elemental. Especially given the shelf life of this accessory, the fact that it's still meta in JP right now, you don't have to worry about it being power crept anytime soon, right? Especially since you can get it basically now. That's why it's near the top of our list.
Okay, so the next A4 that we're going to talk about is Agnias A4. As we stated before, any source of cap up is really valuable for us, and more so in this meta where we have 2 or 3 DPS alongside media. 30k cap up while being the front row doesn't sound like much, but 30k more cap up contributes to a lot more than what we think about, especially when we get around 27 hits per break with just 2.5 DPS in our team.
Yeah, I mean, if you just think about it, even in a 3 DPS comp, it's basically equivalent to a 100k cap up accessory. It expands the damage potential of all 3 units, right? Which is highly probable as the meta progresses. And then in a 4 DPS comp, you could potentially be adding 120k total more damage potential per turn. Do keep in mind that the fact that this doesn't have to be on your main DPS or your second highest DPS, right? It just frees up the accessory slots for, another 100k cap up accessory for them. So that's why this accessory is so valuable. And I would argue that it's among the best out of this list.
And now we are going to talk about Oshka's A4. It has 200 attack, which is a lot compared to a 100 attack accessory. It has 50k less cap up than Bargelos A4, so it means that it has 50k cap up. But even then, it's really strong, especially for someone like Kainet that uses 5 BP at the start of a battle.
Yeah, 5 BP is extremely valuable, especially for wave battles. And wave battle format is one of the main battle formats, right? And the fact that it gives a lot of stats along with the cap up is pretty valuable, I would say. And do keep in mind that up until now, we only have 2 5BP2 start accessories, and the other one is Rike's, right? And Rike doesn't have very good stats at all. If you think about it that way, this is really good. Because it's something that's fairly unique and it's useful, short fights or wave battle.
Next is EX Bargelos A4. Even though EX Bargelos A4 applies fan rest down on break, we don't really care about that. For starters, it is a rare debuff, but we have Iris and Tatlocks A4, which contributes to 25% fan rest down for 6 turns. And second, we don't really care about its usage in a fan comp, but rather we only really care that it has 100k cap up and 80 attack. It has 20 less attack than Bargelos A4, but we care more about the cap up it provides anyways.
Yeah, and I think purely in terms of utility, it's not functionally very different from just regular Bargelo A4. Regular Bargelo A4, I mean, maybe sometimes the SP can come in handy. For the fan res down, in reality, fan comps are not too strong of a thing. So those are not the things that we're focused on. I always say the one caveat is that, this A4, you can't really shard for it. It's a pretty big commitment to go for, right? Because I don't think Bargelo EX is ultimately that useful unless you just really like using fan comps or you just really like Bargelo, right? If you want to use him as a main DPS, the EX version is pretty fun for that. But I mean, as a meta character, he's not really it, right?
Time to talk about Bargelos A4. This accessory is basically an upgrade to Bargelos A4 in a bunch of different ways except for the SP part. Having 250 attack and also inflicting 10% sword rest down while being the front row is a really strong combo. 250 attack is really high. If we were to compare it to Bargelos A4, which has 100 attack, it will be 15% stronger while only taking into account the stats, and the sword rest down allows us to use Hikaris and Years A4 while only equipping one breaking accessory. It also helps that, well, this is Pardis. He really enjoys having as many awakenings as he can have, especially his A1 and U10.
It's just pretty much better than Bargelo A4 in every single way. The only downside is that you can't charge for it. But I would say that once we go through the whole list, it'll show that as a true limited A4, it's still among the most desired. So if you're going to chase A4s at all, I guess Pardis A4 is one of the ones you might want to go for. Maybe depending on how your luck goes, right? If your budget is right goals and your budget are right around that limit, maybe you just you see how your first pity cycle goes, and if you feel like it wouldn't hurt your stash too much, you can just go for it, right? You can do another round even for it, because it's practically just like another artifact, except even better, right? It's better than the artifact that we have right now that gives 200 P attack and 100k cap up, because it's 50 more P attack than that. Also gives sword res down, which is, as we know, sword res down is the best damage type, and it's also out of break.
Moving forward to EX Eldricas A4, I think this A4 can be quite underrated to a certain degree. It has 10k less cap up than Agnias, but 20k is still a good amount of cap up for the entire front row, as we stated in the Agnia section. It also applies 10% dagger rest down, which can be quite good for Kaine, but we are already applying 25% rest down on break with Hikaris A4 and Tiziano's passive, and when EX Eldrica comes out, Kaine will already be falling off of the meta as a primary DPS and stay more as a secondary or third DPS.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a little bit worse than Agnias, right? It's 10k less per character, right? Essentially 30k versus 20k, right? It's 33% worse, especially in a non-dagger comp. But even in dagger comp, if you're someone who would go for this, you probably don't need it, because there's so many other sources of dagger res down. This is not super important, I would say, unless you're literally just doing dagger damage out of break. It's not really that important. And also, of course, if you're using a dagger comp, you're going to have Tiziano anyways. So, I mean, he's just going to cap for you. This is why I say it would be only useful in a dagger clear if you can't break, or if it's there's some sort of shield shenanigans where you're just trying to kill out of break because it's too hard to break, right? Which is this is not what dagger comp currently is right now, right? Dagger comp is mostly reliant on breaking for most fights.
The next cap up A4 is Black Knight's A4, which only has 60 attack and 70k cap up. It doesn't sound like much by itself, but the important thing here is that it increases our passive attack cap to 50%. Last time I tested it, it was around 2 to 5% weaker than a 200 attack accessory, but the upside is that it's really easy to reach 15% passive attack thanks to Madeleine's Sin4 and Media's 15% attack passive.
And I would say having 30k less cap up than the Bargelo A4s just makes it a little bit worse than both. And the fact that it's true limited, I wouldn't recommend most people go for this one, but obviously if you're a whale, go for it. There's potential for it to be useful for a little while. It's just a little bit niche, right? It's okay, if a new DPS comes out, do they already have passive cap up in their passives or something to 50%? And even if they don't, would they really need it, right? It depends, you know. It's like, what is their per hit potency? Like, are they more cap limited or are they more buff limited?
Also, for the moment this accessory only sees play on Black Knight, and it's because he doesn't raise his passive attack cap, and also because of the limited amount of cap of accessories that we have right now.
Like, for example, one of the newer characters that we just got in JP is like Abel. He gives himself like 50% passive P attack and axe up. Like, just imagine if he didn't, though. That's the thing, right? Imagine if he only gave himself like 50% passive damage cap up, right? And then his P attack cap up was still 30%. Like, he being able to raise it by another 20% is probably not even worth the trade-off of like having an additional 30k cap up. It depends on how you balance your buffs and debuffs, right? Your roster composition, and you know, he might be hitting cap all the time anyways, right? Even without the 20k. That's why, like, generally speaking, just having more cap is going to be more useful. But when it comes in practice, I guess it always depends on your roster construction and then the relative strength of like the player side stuff, like the weapons and stuff like that versus the enemy equipment grade and stuff like that. So it just depends, right? Obviously, in a meta where you have 3 or 4 DPS, even your pet actions are going to be more focused on net benefit or, you know, skewing towards maybe your main DPS. So maybe as like a sub DPS, you might not hit cap, right? It really just depends. But generally speaking, given all these considerations, I wouldn't say it's something that is as worth chasing as something like, for example, Partis A4.
Yep. Now we have EX Viola's A4. It has 200 magic attack and 100k cap up alongside inflicting 15% fire, ice and light rest down when there is a broken enemy. It does it in a similar fashion to Nier's A4, you only need the enemy to be broken to apply the resistance down, so you can have this accessory on your main DPS and still benefit from the debuffs. The main reason why it's placed down here is because of how bad elemental team comps are rather than the accessory being bad in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to say that like at some point elemental is going to be comparable to physical, then maybe this accessory is a lot better, right? But the fact is that they're not. Whether or not you want it is just based on whether or not you really like elemental comps, right? If you really like elemental comps and you're already a whale, then this is a pretty cool accessory to have. But besides that, I would say that it's not very high priority.
Especially in JP because elemental comps, compared to physical comps, are way weaker than what they can do right now. Right now, wind, thunder and ice are sort of competitive, but in the future, the discrepancy between the two will be way higher.
The thing is just though, even with Oswald, like he's pretty strong. There are going to be fights where using an elemental comp with Oswald, and let's say for example we get like the triangle strategy rerun with fire, we can use Frederica, who's really strong fire DPS. And then for lightning, you know, we have pretty strong characters. There are going to be fights where like, oh, you know, you can now do like the shortest turn count if you want using elemental. But even considering all those factors, if you look at the fact that he's coming out right now and then you look at the fights coming up and then moving forward, this is not going to be meta for any of them. So essentially you're just speedrunning old content using elemental. Like this new elemental guy that's going to give you follow-up attacks for fire, ice, and lightning is not useful for any of the upcoming future, you know, hard fights. So it's like, what do you need it for? Like, if you're going to have like one elemental damage type that's like useful for a fight on release, that would probably like be dark. The slight little like brief time period where elemental would have been useful is like for the second level 120 NPC fight, which we've already done, and then for I guess like the third one that's already passed. I think most people didn't even do that. Most people are probably doing it now, or for the people who waited for Magnolia, they can do it with Magnolia relatively easily. Yeah, it's just elemental just doesn't have anything to really make you invest in them for, besides like if you just like the units.
Alright, time to talk about the X Signa A4. So, similar to the artifact we have right now, this accessory has 200 attack and 100k cap up. It also grants the user dead aim if they're an apothecary, but we don't really care about the dead aim part, to be honest. Most of the times on Axe focus teams we are going to use Casty, and in other teams we have the resources of dead aim. As an example, right now it works great on Naval because he's good to a certain degree, so even then the dead aim part has a good niche.
For most intents and purposes, it's basically just another artifact, which is good. I mean, that's one of the best accessories in the game, so it's still good.
Yeah, and we can only keep one artifact per character, so we have to keep our options a little bit spread out. And now we have Aval's A4. It has 140 attack with 70k cap up, which ends up being a little bit worse than Black Knight's A4 if our character doesn't raise its passive attack cap, but it compensates for it with the ability to exploit spear and bow weaknesses if our user is an apothecary and uses a physical attack.
It's basically an accessory for Avil for now, I guess, until maybe, I guess, the next really good axe DPS replaces him. I will say Avil might be a little bit underrated. I think he's quite good in this modern era of multi-DPS, right? Basically, Midia plus 3 DPS, or if she is also a decent DPS, especially, like her follow-up attacks are just really strong, even coming from herself. So it's like a 3.5 DPS comp. He's quite good at it because he's very self-sufficient.
Yeah, the only issue that Abal has is that his LP makes it so his preparation turns compete with Black Knight's setup. So for fights where you want to use him, Abal is competing against Black Knight and Pardis if you're going for a 2 DPS team. You can interchange Pardis and Abal's spots sometimes, especially because he has more multi-hits compared to Pardis, but ideally you want to use Abal in a 3 DPS team with Black Knight and Pardis, similar to how we're seeing this against the new 120 NPC.
Yeah, like once you have 3 DPS and you're spreading, your action economy and your buffs and all your actions, at that point, Avil's probably doing more damage than someone like Kaine, for example, right? Because to support Kaine, it's probably like a little bit more challenging to get her all the way, past Avil's potential. He also has his precast thing too, which is pretty strong.
Now we are going to move forward and rank the debuffing and debuffing extension accessories. Accessories that extend buff duration by 1 turn end up being really valuable for us because most of our strongest buffs only last 1 or 2 turns, like Shanna's 3P regen, Black Maiden's ultimate, Hugh Jep's ultimate, EX Tatlock's breaking passive, Tiziano's ultimate. By having one of their accessories, it allows us to use most of these buffing skills the turn before break or heavily impact the outcome of a fight. For Black Maiden, for example, we can use her ultimate the turn before break, which is a big deal because thanks to it, we can shape the enemy's shield with a unit that doesn't hit weakness or save an action on the break turn. In comparison, the buffing extension accessories are not as impactful. The most important debuffs that we can apply already last long enough for us to make use of them, and the units that do benefit from them don't see a lot of play together, so most of the time you only need 2 of them at best.
Here's the thing, right? Like for most of COTC's meta for global, I would say that debuff accessories have been more important than buff accessories because the meta has been mostly more debuff centric, and also just like the buffing characters, they basically have like 3 turn minimum buffs generally. But just like Silent said, going forward, a lot of the JP units, they really benefit from just 1 more turn of buff extension instead. So the emphasis shifts. That's why, for example, it would be your 3rd debuff accessory because remember we get one for free from a 4-star character, right? And also Hana EX's A4 is shardable. In which case, let's say if there's another near rerun and then you don't have A2 at all, right? You're not even close to A4. I would say that obviously if you are a meta player, you might want to go for it anyways. But if it were a choice between her A4 and Gloria A4, just starting from 0, I would say that a Gloria A4 is more important. Having like 3 buff extension A4s is probably more important than having 3 debuff extension A4s.
Yeah, and more because since a lot of characters want to have this buffing accessory, it's almost the norm to have 2 buffing accessories in your clears. Even having 3 of them is not uncommon.
And then, so we can just go ahead and put Hasmi A4 up in S tier as well, especially because it's chartable. It's not as good as Prim's because it doesn't give you BP regen to start. Prim's is 4 turns of BP regen if you factor in the buff extension effect. And then Gloria's, it's quite good. It gives you HP barrier to start, and it has some niche uses. Some characters benefit from having a shield barrier, or there are some cases where just having a little bit more HP can be quite helpful. And then I guess Hana EX's A4, we just talked about it, can go ahead and go into S tier because, it's chartable and it's been chartable for a while. A2's A4, I guess it just depends on if you already have A2, you already have like many awakenings on her, I guess you can go for it, but I wouldn't put it over the A4s that we have in A tier, especially as it's not a chartable A4, right? It's functionally probably a little bit better than Hana EX's A4 just because it also has damage up. Not as worth going for, I would say, at this stage of the metagame.
Right. A2's A4 biggest usage is with EX's Reina, mainly because she raises the passive bow cap to 50% and she only has 10% bow damage up, so she appreciates the damage up alongside being able to extend her always grip when attack debuff. It works quite well, but I consider it to be justifiable, and more because it's only 1 unit that works as a 3rd DPS.
And you can probably do without it, that's not, like missing a little bit of damage from her is probably not like the end of the world.
Yep. Okay, now it's time to talk about the Special Gauge A4s. Right now, 100% Special Gauge accessories are not really impactful. They are strong and they help you save 1 action, but in the future it becomes really desirable thanks to the 200% Special Gauge mechanic with support ultimates. They save us 2 actions. one from having to use an attack or a BP pet to charge your ultimate, and the other one from allowing your partner to act while casting the support ultimate. It becomes so egregiously strong that you can use the support ultimate users as backpacks. You can use Parties and Signa as his row partner and do something like using Signa's 200% ultimate alongside Party's front row buffing skill, and the next turn use Party's ultimate and Signa's Suave's down skill all in only 2 turns. It is a heavy investment to go towards this combo, more because it used to require 2 accessories and one of them was shardable, but it's worth it with the amount of rewards it provides.
Yeah, it's just something that becomes a lot more useful in the Alt 2.0 meta. For now, it's generally something that's more useful for really short speed clears. Well, first of all, the only one that's shardable is Temenos A4. And it's also nice that it gives cap up too. That one's immediately an S tier. And then out of these 3 remaining, Kinase is definitely above the other 2 just because she herself is such a strong meta DPS for so long and her Awakenings are still also useful, so you're already getting value out of pulling her anyways. And also her banner is a tri-banner, even if she does have her individual banner. Just making more pulls in that exchange is helpful just because there's also another A4 that's really good on that exchange, right? So you can't really go wrong with chasing for A4. You're not going to be wasting pulls. And then among these other 2, I mean, let's just say that having more ultimate A4s is really beneficial for short clears. So if you're someone who really likes to do speed clears, then these 2 are also automatically in S tier, just especially in the Alt 2.0 meta. But I will say, because they're not shardable and also because these 2 characters aren't very meta in and of themselves, there is an argument that you could also put them in A tier. Just, I guess, depends on your priorities. In a longer clear, it doesn't matter as much as in a shorter clear, though it is still helpful to get all your ults up if you're going for a fast first break.
True. So, these accessories don't strictly fall into one single category because they grant the user something different, like a specific buff, or do something unique that differentiates them from the rest, and we're going to start this list with Eleonora's A4.
I would say it can still be pretty useful for some fights. Like, even if you have everything else, even if you have the Christmas dodge accessory, which not everyone even has, because you had to pull on the, the free Ruby banner to get it, for global at least. There's the free one that gives you 5 elemental and 5 physical dodges. And then you have like some really shitty ones. Like when you swap to the front, you get 1 dodge or some crap like that. Like there's some like crappy ones. But there's not too many really good ones, and I would say that hers is quite a good one. And for some scenarios, you might want to have an extra 5 dodges, even if you already have EX Ophelia's. But EX Ophelia is definitely an S tier, I would say. Like, she enables you to do certain setups that were otherwise impossible, just because you have those dodges, right? Like, in all those fights that are doing some BS AoE or BS random target attacks, the fact that you don't have to cast a regen or a heal early on, and you can just do your own thing, right? Just do your setups and whatever, and then let the boss do whatever they want, and you just keep dodging it like a ninja. And then by the time that he's, like potentially even 3 turns later, in combination sometimes with like 1 tank or 1 dodge tank, right? Everyone's pretty much ready. At that point, you can either break, or you can set up your like a single turn heal move, mid-turn heal, mid-turn ult heal, or regen. At that point, it wouldn't matter. Being able to set up really early and not worry about like the really early gimmicks, it's almost like a cheat code in certain fights.
I also want to mention that in the future, these strategies are more reliable with Shanna, so we can rely on them a little bit more with these kind of comps.
Here's the thing, right? Shanna gives you cheat death, but generally you also want the other effect, which is her BP regen. But if you cast it early, just so that you can not die, it's not more action efficient than even applying like a regen if that keeps you alive, right? It's not a very action efficient action to have to do that earlier on, because then your BP regen will run out, right? You want to either do it right before break, or you want to start stacking it 2 turns before. So being able to survive for like the first 2 or 3 turns before that is really useful. That's where this comes in, right? And also, especially since, Shanna's EX skill has limited uses. You can't even just spam it.
Yeah, we also don't need everyone to be at full HP. The only relevant unit that comes to my mind that actually needs to be at full HP would be Parties. But if you use his ultimate the turn before break, you shouldn't even worry about this. Maybe Olio now that he got buffed in Taiwan, but that doesn't diminish this accessory's value. It's more of an exception to the rule, and even then he still benefits from it. Also, there are some cases where you don't use Shanna in your team and go full kamikaze to a certain degree, and if we don't use Shanna, then we don't have a lot of viable regen users any longer, so this accessory gives us more leeway to go for these kind of specialties too.
Yeah. I would say that EX Ophelia's accessory is one of the best, if you're not accounting for the fact that it's true limited, but also because of how unique it is. It's more likely that we're going to get like maybe even 4 or 5 more cap up A4s before the next time we get something like EX Ophelia's. Especially since if they give us something like EX Ophelia's again, it would just stack with hers, making it even more broken. It is so clutch that it would just change your entire strategy going into a lot of hard fights, whether you have it or you don't, right? If you don't, you might even have to change your team comp a little bit. It could literally be the difference of you using Cecil or not. It could be the difference between you using regen or not, or you setting up debuffs and defensive mitigation or not, right? And a lot of times, like bosses, like they might have one action and it hits a lot. It can change your entire strategy. It can change your team comp. Also, this thing applies in wave battle in every single round. If you can make a fast clear for every single round, you just don't worry about healing or mitigation or any of that at all.
Yep, it's really strong. And moving forward, now we are going to talk about the Particio A4. You don't mainly want this accessory on your main DPS because it doesn't have cap up, but the 1 BP regen it grants whenever spending 3 BP does come in handy for other users. It also comes with a 100% ailment resistance up, and in the future more enemies are going to be applying more ailments.
With the resistance ailment thing, you have to keep in mind that it doesn't resist any of the special ailments, right? For the special ailments, you need to have like unique resistance accessories to resist those. And a lot of those are free if they exist, or they just don't exist. That being said, some fights just spam a lot of status on you, and most of them might be just like the basic ailments, in which case these status immunity accessories, having at least one of them might be pretty useful. I would say that Particios is probably more useful if you're going to have just one of them. His is good for like, for example, like a little bit longer fights or certain setups where you might want like multiple sources of BP regen. In like really long wave battle fights or something like that, where you have like this some stupid max restriction bullshit, then it's like one of those A4s that you would bring really often.
Alron's is also useful, but it has 20 less attack and the user recovers 20 SP whenever he switches to the back instead of having the ailment resistance part. So its main selling point is the BP regen and the fact that it comes in a more versatile unit to have. Well, this is the end of the first part of the tier list. Stay tuned for the second part of the video where we talk about the debuffing accessories alongside some of the new accessories we obtained in JP. Remember to also follow these other COTC content creators. All of the footage from this video was obtained from them, and frankly, watching their videos might help you to keep up to date with the future content. I hope that you all enjoyed the first part, and I'll see you in the follow-up video.